Welcome everyone to the Contour community meeting. Today is September 8th, 2020. The time is 1:01 p.m. on the East Coast. Welcome everyone, and we're going to start off with some news.
Yeah, so we released Contour 1.8.1 last week. I think we talked about it at the last office hours real quick. But this was the, just for future folks who might be watching this. So Matt Moore works on Knative, and as part of the Knative deployment, you can use Contour as the ingress controller to route traffic around in all the Knative inner workings. So Matt was doing some testing of upgrading the version of Contour that ships in Knative from an old one, like 1.3 or something, I believe, to latest. And there were some issues he found with performance, where the performance got a lot worse in later versions. Since found out that there was sort of an issue that we could solve in how those status updates. So Contour is in charge of writing status out to different objects. So things like HTTP proxy objects as well as ingress objects. So it writes status for those, updating, is it valid, is it invalid, all that sort of stuff. There was an issue of how we were doing those updates. Basically, the API server was rate limiting us. The updates would stack, and it caused Envoy to get slow. So that's in. That was the reason of the 1.8.1 real quick. So if you're running Contour, this is a great recommendation. Now, this only really affected large clusters. I think the smaller ones didn't really notice it as much, just because of the problem wasn't as apparent. But yeah, so it's cool. So thanks, shout out to Matt for his work and Nick for doing the change really quickly last week.
Awesome, thank you. Next up, we have what have we been working on?
Yeah, so I had the same thing I feel like I've been talking about for weeks now, but it's actually almost done. So there's one more PR there in the list that I think Jonas is pulling up now to finish, which I think will land soon. There's just a couple little things I need to fix up for comments. But basically what happens now is if you actually go to the second link there, Jonas, what we have now in the config file there's this XDS server type option. And the idea here is that Contour ships with its own built-in XDS server. And the idea was that we wanted to have a way that you could switch to this Go control plane type, but not actually have to do it all at once, right? So maybe you weren't ready to switch, and we want to test it some more. So now you can toggle between the two. So Contour is the default one. I think you can choose Envoy, which does the Envoy XDS type. So now that that's in there, once this PR lands that we had on the other tab, that will have full support now for swapping out the Contour XDS server with the upstream Envoy Go control plane. So in theory, no one's should notice a difference in terms of how Contour works or performs. But once we have this Go control plane now, we'll be able to easily switch to like ADS and those sort of things, which are kind of neat. I think our other plan was to start the switch now to the XDS v3 types and start implementing those. So that will come here. I think next after we get this in. So that was all. So yeah, just let you know that once this is landed, nothing will change again unless you buy into it. I guess was the big thing I wanted to get across. And then we'll watch that. I think eventually we'll switch. We'll have it just, we'll take out, like we did with ingress route, we'll deprecate the built-in XDS server and then switch over to it fully. So that's for those two things, yeah.
Sounds good. Any questions, comments for Steve?
No, I'm excited about that. That's cool.
Awesome. Next up, stevekriss.
Yeah, not too much of an update, but I talked last week about some of the refactoring work that I took over in the DAG package around how we build the DAG, which is Contour's kind of internal representation of the various ingress APIs and all the related objects. So I'm continuing with that a little bit to continue to sort of improve the internal interfaces around this. And really the goal here is to make it easier for Contour developers in the future to add new code that adds objects to the DAG. So as we're looking at implementing, additional APIs, so things like service APIs or ingress v2, if this is done well, then it means that adding those things will be a little bit simpler. So that's kind of what I've been looking at for the last few days.
Sounds good. Any questions, comments for Steve?
Yeah, if folks are interested in that, I know that the last office hours we went through a big walkthrough of how Contour takes data from Kubernetes and then processes through to get to Envoy. So that's a good, once that gets posted up on YouTube, that'll be a good thing to watch if anyone's interested in understanding a little bit more about what Steve's working on. So yeah, and that would be nice. That'd be nice to break those things apart. And we can be able to, then we're going to hit full charge in the service APIs work as well. Those are starting to get finalized. So it'd be great to have that work. Be able to test them out, in a real Ingress controller.
Speaking of the office hours, there were a lot of people that joined in on Thursday last week. So thank you everyone for joining in. It was fun to see a full house. And you talked about a bunch of different things in there, and you covered a lot of ground in 2 hours, I think. I believe it is on YouTube already, so it should be viewable for those that didn't watch it. If it isn't, it'll be up later today.
Where does that go? Is there a link somewhere on the community site? I guess I should know this.
It should be linked there, yes.
YouTube playlist. Okay. August 20th is the latest one.
Huh. All right.
At least in the playlist.
I'll fix that.
Yeah.
I thought I uploaded everything on Friday, but apparently not.
Yeah.
Well, Thursday. So I'll get that done.
Yeah, no worries. Cool. Thanks.
All right. Next up, we have a discussion topic. Chad.
Yay. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Jonas. And also real quick on the YouTube, I do remember that there was a conversation we had probably 2 or 3 weeks ago regarding setting up a dev environment. So I haven't checked the YouTube if it's there or not yet, but I just wanted to also throw that out there too, that I think that would probably be helpful, hopefully for me and other people that are trying to do Contour dev on how to kind of get that local environment set up. So, but yeah, so thanks, Jonas. Cool. Yeah. So, so I've been looking a little bit into kind of Auth Providers and how they work with Contour and Kubernetes, so our last conversation from my perspective anyways, really cleared up the purpose of Contour in terms of kind of it acting as like a translation layer between Kubernetes objects and events and Envoy configurations essentially. Right. And I think overall, that's the theme that I got out of kind of Contour being that middleman, right? That translates Kubernetes events to Envoy configurations. And one of the things, obviously like the purpose of Contour for Kubernetes cluster is so important, right? Handling ingress and routing. And one of the things that I'm working on in my own kind of cluster is I want to be able to manage authentication and authorization for pretty much everything that goes into my cluster, right? So if there's a route that's being directed and Contour is essentially configured that route. How does this external auth stuff kind of work? And I was just wondering, I thought it might be a good, conversation topic. So, just, yeah. And how does that work, with Kubernetes and Envoy and, how far can we take this essentially? So.
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple things, I guess. So a lot of the services in Envoy, they get their network filters that you add onto the Envoy configuration. And a lot of times what you do is you configure some external service. So in the case of external auth, you would stand up an auth service. And that service would talk to Envoy over gRPC. So one thing we have to configure, and this is the design that Jonas has up here that James worked on, of how we're actually going to implement this external auth in Contour. But the high level bit is that what you'd first do is you define this thing called an extension service. And what this is this will be a CRD, which will define what that service looks like that you're going to connect to, right? So you're going to configure Envoy to say, hey, when a request comes in, go reach out to this external service over gRPC and ask it, basically thumbs up or thumbs down, should this request be authorized or not? So what happens is Envoy will receive the request. Once this is all configured, it'll pass it off to that external service, and that external service will do whatever magic it needs to do. It could reach out to an OIDC provider, it could do an internal check of a database, whatever it needs to do, it can do. and then it'll return a result back to Envoy, and then Envoy will respond back to the client with, 200, it's okay, keep going, or 403 redirect, whatever the case may be. So the idea is in contours, and this the same thing works for like the rate limiting service. So I think a year and a half ago, I wrote a bunch of rate limiting work, and it kind of fell off the wagon, but that works the same way, right? So you stand up an external service, which implements how rate limiting should work. And then a request comes in, Envoy asks that service, should this request go through or not? And then that happens. So in that design doc that we had there in the notes, James walks through a couple pieces. So the first piece is that extension service CRD, and that's going to describe what that external service looks like. So the service that Envoy needs to go connect to. We need that for a couple reasons. One is we have to bring that, we want to bring that service into the Envoy cluster, so we can then do metrics on it and do all the things that Envoy can do to watch that service. And then we want to be able to have an extension point to implement other bits. So things like rate limiting, and there's like some logging things that we could do as well that this extension service can be reused for. So that's the high level bit, if that makes sense. I know there's another link we could send you that has the, James had started an auth repo. Where is it? First of all, does that make sense? And I ran through that pretty quick, but.
Yeah. So I think it does. Maybe a couple questions I could
Sure.
just run by you real quick. So, okay. So when we're creating this extension service, essentially it's going to be a pod that's running a gRPC server, right? And we register this extension service with Contour in our manifest, right? Like in some sort of manifest, we tell Contour, hey, register this external service. And I guess we give it a service name, and then Contour is going to tell Envoy, hey, connect to this gRPC service as an external provider. And then once Contour is configured Envoy to do that, then Contour is no longer kind of in the picture, right? The request comes into Envoy, the gRPC goes to that external service. We respond with a yes, no to Envoy, and then how to essentially respond with like a 301 redirect or something like that, right? Is that the overall?
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Here, I can share. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, is this a feature complete thing, or is this something that's kind of in the process, or there of?
It's definitely in flight right now. So there's some bits here. So out here in Contour, there's a couple PRs that James has. So the first one is implementing the support for this external service. These are some of the internal bits. So this one's just about ready to go. So this one will allow the thing that Steve was talking about, that DAG processor bit. We need a way to include those external services now into Contour to let Contour know about how, what they are. Because right now Contour just watches for Kubernetes services. And this new type is going to let us watch for this new CRD type. Once that's in, I believe James has this other one here, which adds, this implements the bits into HTTP proxy. So this PR here builds on the last couple. So this is actually going to have the bits to actually configure your proxy to actually look for, to add the auth pieces to your ingress object, right, to your HTTP proxy object.
Okay.
To actually map it and say, now that I have so once you do all the plumbing to wire up all these auth services and stuff, and then you have to tell, which route do you want to have auth on and how it should talk to what service, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. So that CRD is actually defined by Contour.
Yes.
Right. Okay. And then we just deploy that CRD, right? And then is there like a container? So is there like a pod that gets attached, or like a service that gets attached to that CRD? So do we have to deploy a deployment that is that gRPC service that, talks to the Auth provider or whatever, and then kind of like register that service with the CRD? Is that kind of how that works?
Yeah, you're gonna have to deploy some sort of service that's going to be that external bit. So here out in Project Contour, I think James has this auth server here. So this is a generic auth server that James wrote that you could stand up to be that gRPC endpoint. And I believe this was just for testing. So this is going to use, passwords, a basic auth password thing. But the idea is that you've got to put some sort of service in to talk to whatever provider you want to talk to, right? So say you're authing with, Auth0 or Google or Azure or whatever your external service might be. You stand up some service to do that part. So I guess this is the part that was confusing for me as well. But this design here, this external authorization support, is just designing the plumbing to hook up Contour to some sort of authorization server, right? That's all the plumbing bits to get everything wired up to talk to something. The actual implementation is still, at this point, we have to make this a little more mature, but up to you to get that integrated properly. So I think we've talked about adding an OIDC provider, auth server, to maybe extend this auth server project to do OIDC as well, or something like to talk to Dex or something generic like that. But there's always going to be, like, auth always has a specific service or other kind of things around it that make it difficult to make it generic, without having it be having 1,000 command flags and stuff to configure all these different parameters and stuff. So
Totally.
so I guess we got to figure that out and understand from the community and you folks that, hey, what are you looking to talk to? Do you need some sort of generic service that we can all contribute to, or is it specific to your environment, or however that might look and feel?
Absolutely. And I think from our perspective, right, we're going to have probably several authentication mechanisms. I think we're going to have some Kerberos, like internally. We're going to have an external auth provider. Now, from my understanding, our external auth provider is not actually like OIDC, like fully compliant. I think I've got Andrew. Andrew, are you on here? Because Andrew did a lot of that integration. He knows kind of the best.
I am, yeah.
Yeah, was it fully like OIDC, or there was some kind of special stuff we had to do, right, with that external auth provider we were working with?
Yeah, they have a different flow.
Okay.
Slightly different.
Yeah. So I think the fact that it's generic enough, Steve, like you said, that there's like so many kind of like, we don't want to have something where it's like we've got to try to fit something that's so kind of pre-baked for us. I think having the flexibility is like, just point, hey, here's the auth provider. It's going to give you the, the results you need, I think is great. So that sounds awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've got a lot of work in, everyone heard of Gangway? This was from Heptio. This is the Heptio Labs thing, but the idea of this was to let you get some credentials to talk to a Kubernetes cluster through OIDC or something. So you would configure Gangway to then talk to whatever provider that was. And then you'd log into this website, and it would generate you a kubeconfig file to then talk to a cluster. But this is sort of the same thing we just talked about, where there's a whole bunch of config files to do all the configuration. I'm trying to see where I forget where it is, but yeah, like each one has a different like setup and stuff. Because Gangway is a little different than Google, which is a little different than Azure, which is a little different than even though there's standards in air quotes. There's always these little itty bitty things that are different. So I guess my point with this was we can pull out of stuff from this as well if we need to, to be able to have a lot of work that's done. So it's definitely moving along. I know James got blocked up a little bit on some of the other plumbing bits internally. Like we had to switch to to do a single Envoy set of cluster load assignments for endpoints and stuff. But now we're over the hump for a lot of those bits that we can now move forward quickly with this stuff.
Fantastic.
Hey Steve, I had a quick question about this as well. So I know this has been in development for quite a while, and about 2 weeks ago, I guess, a new Auth filter landed in the main branch. So it's not yet in a release, but it's something that the folks at Pinterest. One of the guys at Pinterest who left Pinterest, but it was finished off by the Pinterest folks, and it's a built-in OAuth 2 filter. Okay. And I was wondering what impact that has, and whether that would be an additional functionality to sort of turn on that filter, and whether that would make sense. So obviously this can call that to an auth server, but there may be an opportunity to just leverage a filter directly inside Envoy versus externalizing as an additive approach.
Yeah, we'll have to look. I know during some of the design stuff that James did, that we looked at that. I like the idea of not having these extra bits running around, right? Not having to deploy this auth bit and configure it and have another thing to manage and upgrade and run. I think is great. So I personally, I think that'd be a great move to allow that. So say you are just wanting to do OIDC, just turn on the filter and keep going. We just have to look to see how that might fit into the bits.
That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, as I said, it is brand new, but we've got teams that are currently doing a whole bunch of custom Lua coding and stuff, and we've been following this OAuth filter for a long time, and it finally landed. And so our internal teams are pretty excited because they think they can actually just get rid of a whole bunch of additional scaffolding and custom Lua code and just completely get rid of that.
Yeah,
which would be nice.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, we'll have to. I'll take a look at that. It says as OIDC. Excuse me. I'll go find that. Or if you have a link to it, that'd be great just to look at it. Is it this one maybe? I've been here before. This might be it. Cool. Yeah, I'll take a look at that.
Yeah, it's landed, and there is documentation on the website as well now, so it's all sort of been pushed through. But as I said, I think it's in 1.16.0 dev. No, it's not in a release yet.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like here I added a link to it from.
Yeah, there you go.
From this root one, yeah. All these references all over the place, yeah. So, yeah, we'll have to see how that might fit. Yeah. Cool. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Does that make sense, Chad? Anyone else? Andrew, Chad, whenever any kind of.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I think, I was just talking to kind of Andrew and Kevin a little bit about it, and I think it totally makes sense. And we're going to, it's going to be a few months, right, before we, I think, kind of are ready that we've got, something we can say, hey guys, we got it and it's working or it's not. But definitely we're going to be doing a lot of, I wouldn't say customization, but, external authentication and authorization, at essentially every request level, right? Every request level in our use case essentially needs to go through some sort of authentication authorization. And I think being able to do that kind of at the ingress level, really lets people know that, yeah, we've got a secure environment without having to, try to manage that on each individual deployment essentially. So
yeah, for sure.
Really cool. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah. And I don't think once I start getting into this, I might have more questions, but thank you. This is awesome.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. And I think timing wise, if folks are looking for that, I know that James is working pretty hard on this, and it's middle of the night for him, so he's not here to comment where he is. But I know he's got a couple PRs. So once that other PR runs or lands, then this one will come in, and then we can probably wire it all together. Being he already has the sample auth server out here, which one? This one. We should be able to wire up something, and then take a breath and see where we are with everything, and run from there. I think all the plumbing will be there then to do this, so doesn't look too far away. Cool.
Awesome. Any other questions or discussion topics that anyone wants to bring up today?
I have one other, but I can just be quiet for a second and let other people, go. But if nobody has anything, I have probably one more that I could probably talk. If you guys are for it.
I say go for it.
Okay, cool. Then I might actually share screen real quick, if that's okay.
Sure.
What I was gonna do is maybe just talk really quick. So I've got an issue, an open issue, and there's just kind of some interesting updates that I thought I might want to share, and just kind of maybe get some feedback from everybody on this. So let me see. So this kind of started us back in the day, I would say probably a month or two ago, where we were, I put in an issue regarding the ability to kind of modify headers, right? And essentially what I was looking for is, we've got these internal applications that do these 302 redirects, right? So you may say, okay, go to, app.example.com, and it's going to redirect you. It's going to send a 302.1 redirect with a location header of app.example.com/login, right? Essentially. And not all applications can be essentially configured to say, okay, it thinks it's running over HTTP because it's behind our cert manager, and all the proxy stuff over here. And not all applications can say, hey, respond with, HTTPS, right? And so the problem is when we embed with iframes, what you'll see is, over the browser, the request gets sent over HTTPS, it does the cert manager SSL termination here, then it goes to HTTP at the pod, then the application is what sends that 302.1 redirect with that location header, and then it gets fed back. And the problem is we sent the request over HTTPS, but the response came back HTTP, right? And then that's when the browser goes, error protocol mismatch, right? And what we would need for it to happen is that, it goes to HTTPS, HTTP, the application thinks it's running over HTTP, so it does a 302.1 redirect, and it's actually Envoy that would be essentially, changing that location, header from an HTTP to an HTTPS, right? And then I kind of talked about, well, we've got these add, these set, and these remove functions, right, in Envoy. And then also in Contour, right, where we can essentially specify. But then I put here, the problem with like setting, right? So like if I were to try to do a set on like a per app basis or something, then we have this issue happen where it kind of like does a circular like, redirect every time. And then, so anyways, I kind of brought, that up. But, long story short, so I was doing a little bit of research and then I noticed that there's actually an Envoy issue here that somebody submitted a PR for, right? So somebody actually just about the same time that I submitted my issue, submitted this in Envoy. And this is before I knew that really there's a dependency on Envoy to have the functionality, and then Contour just does the configuration. But obviously I still think that there's something that we could talk about within the Contour in terms of like, okay, what should the manifest look like, right, for this type of, functionality. And we're kind of having this discussion, I think, now on the Envoy issue here, where somebody kind of, chimed in and said that, look, we've already got a set and remove, are we really just doing the same thing? But I don't think so, right? I think that there's actually a need for like a replace functionality. And this isn't actually the feature that I was looking at. It would be another, wait, actually, is it this one here? Ah, here we go. Okay, yeah. So was it submitted as a PR? It looks like it was. Yeah, so this guy actually submitted a PR regarding this, right? And he was looking for the exact same thing I was on the location header, which is the exact same example that I provided in my Contour issue here. But then you can see that we got some feedback this morning, right? Saying that, we've already got API fields to add or remove response headers. There's discouraging from introducing a redundant mechanism. But I feel that there's actually a need for a replace mechanism where, it would be, something like this, right? Like, okay, for the location header, find everything that's HTTP : and replace it with an HTTPS : I don't know how we would be able to use the remove or, the add or set, the set or remove functions of Envoy to actually do this, and solve the use case, the problem that we're having. And it looks like I'm not the only one that's having it as well. But so I think my way forward is I'm going to continue to talk with the folks over on the Envoy side and see if maybe we should add these functions to Envoy and then, get these introduced into Contour as well. But it just looks like there's other people with, that are looking for this type of functionality. And originally, I think he submitted it as a, location header rewrite. And my suggestion was, well, let's just make it a little more generic so that we could actually just rewrite any sort of HTTP header and, just specify which header we want to rewrite. Because we already do things in Envoy like rewriting paths, right? So they've got like path rewrites, so, we already kind of have this functionality in some regard, but we don't have it for HTTP headers. And I do feel it would be useful, but I wanted to maybe stop there and see if this made sense or what other people thought about this. So.
Yeah, for sure. I forget now if I know Envoy has add and remove. I think we made it set to do that, but I don't know you can replace the header though. I think if you added a second one, you'd have two headers, which still felt weird. I have to double check that to see. I mean, I believe, Harvey on here would know what's up. We have add remove, but not set, I don't believe. Yeah. Sorry, I don't think I'm making any sense. I need to check to see if how this replace might work. You know what I mean? In Envoy itself. If it doesn't, it doesn't seem like it does that. So from what you need, we have to think about how else we might be able to do this. Maybe external auth would solve you because you wouldn't have to have your backend app do the auth bit then.
Yeah, well, this isn't actually really regarding the authentication part, but more just like, for example, he has, kind of some examples here, like, okay, if I want to set, like service name, and then there's some sort of like remove some sort of internal secret header, that gets passed around internally, you'd want to remove that before it kind of goes outside of your, outside of your cluster. But then something like this, right, where there's some sort of like, okay, I want, there's a header and it has some sort of value, but I want to do some sort of like, find replace of that value in that HTTP header. And I was looking at like the path rewrites, but obviously that's for HTTP paths, right? So that's going to look in the path part of the HTTP payload, but there's nothing for like headers, right? And so I think this would actually be a pretty easy thing to do in Envoy. I think it's mainly just, communicating properly, what it is that we're doing and why it's necessary. But I think it should be, and we've already got this, this PR here where it looks like they've already kind of done some work, right? In terms of like, adding the different parts within, like the protobufs and, some of the different functions and stuff. Now they call it location header rewrite. I would just call it HTTP header rewrite.
Right.
And then you just give it which header, what you're looking for, and what you want it to be like replaced with, essentially. And so, just my overall perspective, I think this should be actually doable. But again, I just wanted to bring this up to everybody and, get feedback or, just kind of let y'all know that this is something I definitely want to, keep looking at with these guys. So.
Cool. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, let me go relook at that issue again, and I'll look through all these as well and see if I can comment and help clarify as well.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to bring it up, and I'm not necessarily saying this is the way or something, but definitely just bring it up and kind of make my case and get some good feedback on it. So.
Yeah. No, for sure.
This is great. Thank you so much, Chad.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
We are at time. So with that, we're going to close out this week's meeting. Thank you all for joining. And we do have a meeting next week again on the later time schedule for our Australia folks. And we also have a Contour office hours next week as well on Thursday, the 17th. So please join us then. And with that, have a fantastic rest of the week, everyone.
Yeah, take care.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.